Hello, Changemaker.
Welcome to the Innovation Room.
A place for business leaders,
Change agents and change champions.
anyone who wants to know where digital transformation is taking us.
A place that sparks ideas.
And explores what's really possible with software and technology.
Ready?
Let's see what's happening.
Welcome to the Innovation Room, where we explore application of technology and AI in business, the ideas shaping our future. Today, we are exploring the future of real estate with advancements in artificial intelligence in combination with other technologies such as IoT and digital twins. AI is not just reshaping how we interact with physical spaces, but redefining the very essence of property management, occupancy, and sustainable living. Real estate, an industry that is foundational to our economy, is on the cusp of a transformative era. I am Somayeh, CEO of Geeks. Please join me in the Innovation Room with Emilia Cardamone, technical expert in smart buildings, digital management, and digital twins. Hi, Emilia. Thank you so much for joining me in the Innovation Room. It's lovely to have you. Can we start with an introduction of yourself and a very interesting career that you've had so far?
Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm Emilia Cardamone, and I'm an associate director within the real estate digital team at Turner & Townsend. Predominantly, I focus on smart buildings, smart assets, smart cities and communities, and I've always had that kind of focus, even in my past experience. And also, like, my biggest focus is digital twins and how digital twins can be implemented in the real estate sector predominantly, but also looking at other sectors as well, like infrastructure and so on.
Wonderful. And before we start getting into the very interesting conversation about the future of real estate with AI, we have our icebreaker question. Who would you bring to the Innovation Room if you want to do some innovation, serious innovation work? Dead or alive, fiction or real, and why would you bring them?
That is a very interesting question. I would bring Renzo Piano, which is an Italian architect, and he has always been at the forefront of making architecture more kind of interesting and innovative back in the days with projects like the Pompidou Center in France. So he's still alive, so I'd be really keen to get him involved in a discussion on what he thinks about the real estate sector and what innovation could do.
What is different? What is different about him that you would want him to collaborate with?
He's always been at the forefront of innovation, and has always been kind of a very inspiring person. I've had the chance to meet him in person before, and he's very inspiring. So I'd like to understand what he has to say on innovation and AI and the impact that it's going to have on real estate and design and architecture in general. So yeah,
cool. Really good segue to the actual podcast. Because our relationship with a space is massively changing. The space we work in, the space we live in, and technology has had always a big impact in the space we are in. But specifically the AI and the impact of it on concepts like digital twins or how we use the data to change the way we interact with the space in which we are in is very interesting. So before we dive into the dare or die bullseye framework that we use to uncover the future of a sector with AI, why don't you start with explaining to us what are the use cases of AI in the real estate that you have seen that has been impressive, or you think it is actually changing the way, the direction it used to go?
Yeah, I think that there's a specific use case for the use of technology in general, more than AI, because before COVID, there was kind of a lot of implementation of new technology, and some companies were at the forefront of investing in technology and digital in general. But with COVID, we all know we had a massive speed on technology implementation, and not just from a software point of view, because we all had to work remotely. So what are we going to do? But also from a real estate perspective, when talking about bringing the workforce back to the office or not, technology has played a pivotal role and is still playing a pivotal role. And so AI is just the latest trend that we see. I mean, not latest really, but it's potentially the thing that
loudest.
catches the loudest and the thing that catches the attention of everyone at the minute. So it's more to do with how you use technology in order to make your workforce happy, and AI could play a pivotal role in there or not. So that's kind of up to discuss. I guess the way I see it is not because it's the latest trend we need to implement it, but you always need to take precautions and build the right use case so that you can implement the right technology, whether it's AI or not. Up to discuss, but like to make the right choice in order to meet what your requirements are, what your goals and objectives are from a company perspective.
Yeah, really good. So if we look at the dare or die bullseye framework, it focuses on finding or uncovering the future of a business or a sector with AI, and for that we go a bit too far, then we come back to closer to today, and we just do that back and forth to find a balance of where is the right place to focus on, and then try to see what are the steps between what is the first next thing that probably is going to happen, and then what's the longer term vision for that sector and how that sector is going to change, and then try to understand where the sector is going, and then what are the potential viable businesses of the future for that sector could look like. So if you look at the real estate, the biggest change that I see, and you also mentioned, is the way we interact with the space after COVID. So we used to have the spaces that were permanently occupied by certain group of people, and that wouldn't change so often. So there was like longer term contracts, lease contracts, or whatever, occupancy contracts that were had on real estates, and companies would establish themselves in those spaces, and that would be that was the expectation, that there is an office you go to, and then that office is occupied by almost the same people over the years, and the way those people interact with that office is in a certain way, and you would see, depending on their sector, they would have certain expectations. Whereas now the trend we see is that collaborative or occupancy of the same space by different people, by different businesses at the same time. So it's more, expectations are more flexible or more variable, that what an office should look like, or what it should provide, or what needs to happen in that office, and how do you manage that? So how do you see the expectation changing over the next few years? And that's our outer layer of the bullseye, like how the expectations of people from a business from a sector is changing.
Well, yeah, the expectation is very high in terms of what the future looks like from an office point of view. And that's because, as we were saying before, you used to go to the office 5 days a week, and now some companies have gone completely remote, or some have just gone hybrid. I hardly see companies mandating to their employees just come back to the office 5 days a week. So there is a need for companies to revisit their office and the technology that is involved in it, but also the design of the office, because people are normally getting into the office for collaborative purposes. So whether it's a workshop, whether it's meetings with colleagues or with clients, so there needs to be more kind of a revised function. Really, it's not just the design, but it's literally like the purpose of the office has changed. And also many people, or like in general, people when applying for a job, they're looking at what the benefits are, if there is this flexibility in place, if it's a remote role, if it's not, what's in it for me. It's kind of a question that is becoming more and more important, because there has also been a shift more towards the mental health from an employee perspective. And so there are different things to consider. So the offices needs to be ready in the future to allocate more space and areas in the office where collaborative working is something that you could do. And it's not just about being in person, because another thing to consider is actually to implement the right level of technology and videos and VR and everything, so that it allows you to have a meeting in the office, but potentially with someone else that it's in another office of your same company, or a client that is sitting elsewhere in the world. So the office layout is completely changing, and it needs to sustain those kind of interaction, whether it's in person or not.
That's a very interesting expectation. So we no longer expect the office to have a single in-person function. We expect the office to be able to accommodate and create the experience of hybrid with whoever, because every meeting we have, the client could be dialing in or some staff might be dialing in, and that, what kind of experience are we creating for them? There is no, it's not good enough if they just sit on a screen and they can't be involved in, in the space. So yes, technologies like VR and those kind of stuff is really important. But going back to the AI and the impact of that on people's expectation, one of the aspects that I can see, and I, as a business owner myself, you would think of, is if the office is not being used all the time by all the people, and the cost of running office is the same, that doesn't work for me anymore, because I
Yeah.
don't want to be spending the same running cost if people are not using it. So I've got two options: either make it really smaller so the cost is controlled, or do something else, which I think more and more I see being the expectation, which is proactive um, maintenance of the office. Instead of, for example, less cleaning the office like 3 times a day, we clean it when it needs to be cleaned. Instead of keeping it warm 9 to 6, regardless of who's in it, who's not, we find the patterns, we see how many people are in, which parts people are in, and then keep the whatever the temperature to that, or keep the cleaning to that routine. So how much of it would you see? Am I being narrow-minded on, like, this is more efficient? Am I pulling my technologist hat on to say, like, well, this
No,
is more efficient, let's do it this way, as opposed to very inefficient of, like, keep cleaning it three times a day?
no. Actually, your consideration is spot on what is happening. The conversation we are having within the sector in general. Before, you didn't have that much data to determine what to do. But now, with the use of technology and sensors and all sorts of other aspects of technology, even just the BMS is something that has been there for a very long time, but many times it wasn't looked at, and really not narrowing down to the nitty gritty of what is happening in a building. But now, because we are working more in a hybrid space, there is a bigger focus on looking at those data and how the office space is used and maintained. Not necessarily it wasn't happening before, but you would run the building like at 100% capacity every day. So you wouldn't really need uh, to see
To pay
literally
attention to that.
yeah, you weren't paying attention. But now there's also the big sustainability driver that every company has. So that pushes towards the use of technology in a more wise way. So not necessarily from an operational point of view or an efficiency point of view. You also need to have a look at dropping down carbon emissions. So what you were saying earlier, as an example, is absolutely spot on. Like, how do I have a look at how much energy I'm consuming? And with energy, then it goes without saying, okay, well, I'm warming up the office like 10 hours a day, and actually there were just two people in the office. So why am I running it in this way? So overlaying different types of sensors and different types of data, actually all the different layers and the stack that it creates, that actually will help you manage your office in a more wise way. Because the majority of time you could actually potentially say, well, let's shut the office down on a Friday, no one is around, and potentially you as a business owner, you are cascading that down to your employees, and just make it as a rule that on Friday no one is going to the office. I'm just making a very silly example, but that would cost down that will cut the cost for you. It would also cut the carbon emissions, and it will make your employers happy, because they're like, yeah, Friday I can work from home. So there's all these different layers to consider. So AI will play a pivotal role in there, because all those types of analysis with AI are going to be faster,
Yeah.
and
And I think when
get
it
in touch very
becomes
easily.
and I think when it becomes super interesting is that you overlay those kind of business considerations, like the cost efficiency, the sustainability, and you overlay that with the behavior, the culture, the happiness, the mental health. And that is not happening at the moment. So it's very separate. So AI makes the intersection of different disciplines really, really interesting. Because if you put, for example, if you monitor the say if you sentiment analysis the communication between teams over time, and then you overlay that by how much they are in the office, and overlay that by how clean the office is, or how how our canteen is being used, or what kind of music is being played in the office. Again, those kind of data will become super super interesting, and that's not something you would write normal code to do. That you don't do that kind of analysis by just like doing. And I very interestingly, we have done a project years ago for one of the, I won't name the name, one of the big property management companies for their cleaning routines. And the project was to bring lean um, uh, discipline into the cleaning. So creating a routine that would take the least amount of time and resources for the cleaning to happen in a very large building. So say stadiums or shopping centers. So what is the most efficient lean way of where the different supplies needs to be, the cleaners, what routine, what route they need to take. And that was very very complex projects, because it was loads of data, loads of like algorithms to create that. But when I think about that project now, I'm like, it could be completely the wrong thing, lots of waste of money if the place wasn't dirty, and you're just cleaning everywhere. But if that place hasn't been touched, say the shop was closed, so no footpath, no footfall was passed during that floor because the shops
Yeah.
were closed, you're not even thinking about that. You're not putting the footfall on top of your normal cleaning routine to find out where is the right. So becoming proactive, it's a whole different way that I think we can and then you can bring it to maintenance to checking, the boilers and heating and that kind of stuff. The like a lot of the lighting and all of that. So instead of waiting for things to not work, you could be proactively like finding patterns of them starting to playing up. So you can be proactive about it. So if you go to the constraints now, so what are the biggest challenges in integrating AI and other technologies into real estate? You have done a lot of technology implementation into the real estate. What has been your biggest constraint in that industry when it comes to technology?
Well, clients or like in general, companies are looking at making things more efficient. So, like that predictive maintenance angle that you were just discussing is kind of very vital. And so, companies have been looking into that because they see the need and they know that there is a technology there that can help you. The main constraints is always, from my point of view, and that's my personal opinion, but it's always like the lack of trust in technology or like the fear of adopting a new technology. And if you have a look at AI, that the fear is there because people don't really know that much about it. They're not in control, and they will never be potentially in control of AI. So it's a matter of educating the sector in a way that the use of technology, the use of AI can actually make their life easier, can enable that predictive maintenance, can enable um, that kind of pattern of well-being for the employees and so on. So technology always needs to be seen as an enabler. So that's kind of like the biggest thing happening when discussing this with clients and in general. Is just the constraint lies in the trust and the ethical side of things more than anything else.
Mm. And you touched on ethical. What about, do you see privacy being a concern? Because there's stuff like I easily talk about implementing IoT and then topping up with AI, and you get amazing, way of knowledge about the building and how it's been used and how it should be used. Um, but going back to the fear that people have, like not everybody, we used to do a joke, I don't know, we might need to cut it out of the podcast, but we used to do a joke when we were talking about implementing IoT in our office, and people were saying, let's put like sensors in the toilets, and then whoever leave the toilet unclean, you just text them, because your facial recognition, their number, you just text them like it's not
That'd
okay
be
to leave the toilet
that'd
like
be
that.
too far.
Yeah. So like, but as technologists, we like to think what can be done, like what
Yes,
different
the art
way
of the
even can
possible.
be done
Mhm.
with technology, what behavioral change you might be able to achieve with technology that you can't achieve without. um but I'm always conscious of, like, we are very pro technology, like we are very trusting in the way of how a technology, because we understand how a technology work, we know how to, where we can trust it, where we shouldn't trust it, and if you don't trust it, what do you do to mitigate the situation? But the public don't have that knowledge, they don't have that level of understanding. So how much you have faced going to a client with a solution and they would say, no, you can't do that in our office, like people would not accept that,
Yeah,
level of.
it's more of a yeah, no, the security angle of things. I don't call myself an expert on cybersecurity and data security and so on, but because I'm more of in the I work more in the strategy piece. But from a security perspective, the blocker not necessarily is the company, but actually the employees are like more concerned on like how can will they use it against me basically, or like getting into the office with face recognition rather than swiping a badge. How's that going to impact my data? What happen if it's going to be hacked and so on? So there's all those sorts of concerns which you can mitigate. The risk is always going to be there, a small amount of risk. Let's be open and honest.
Yeah.
But it's more like working towards the educational angle of things, and bring and making sure that the employer, if the employer believes in that technology that is implementing, making sure that they bring along with them all the employees, and making sure that the employees are trained to use that type of technology, to use that piece of software, to educate them on why you are implementing that kind of technology. So there's several ways of doing this, but I guess the educational piece is the big chunk of
I think
that makes a difference.
I think that's very true, because in my work, I always see people complain about something in one context. And when you show them, they are quite relaxed about the same thing in the other context. They just realize, actually, yes, I don't have a problem with this technology. I am trusting this technology in a different context. One would be, for example, like the fact that we use our face recognition in banking and all sorts of places, like our mobile is
Yeah,
basically it's a gateway to everything, and we easily use face recognition for it. And then you remind them that you are trusting the technology, you are using it in a different context. Why not using it to enter the office? And yes, this is how it works, this is how it is being implemented, would I think be very useful. Plus, also, I always bring that example or that point up, that we easily trust humans where we shouldn't, but we are in our nature. The amount of control and the amount of access we allow the humans around us to have, and we don't question, is
yeah.
quite remarkable, considering what humans how much mistakes they can make, and what biases they have, and what level of competencies people have. But what we do to mitigate that, because we can't work and run around and be afraid of not trusting and be afraid of what mistakes they might make, what we have done is to put regulation in place, to put like guardrails in place, and to monitor someone's work and to check it to see if they are providing the right type of output. So that should be the same with AI and technology. So we shouldn't be really afraid. We should understand its flaws and then put guardrails of how do we actually go about using it. What are the most interesting stuff you have seen? Like, is there any use or you would like to see happen?
So there is a lot. I think AI, where it can play a pivotal role, is to managing data and documents, in a faster and easiest way. That's the biggest use case that you can have in real estate. So, for example, from a lease perspective, like it can detect any fault in the leasing agreement and so on, or like making sure that the documents are like up to date, or where things have happened before and so on. So all those sorts of things fascinates me, because now it's very much manually, and with AI you could do it very, very easily. But then from an office point of view and a layout point of view, definitely the use of AI in managing those data in and making sure that predictive maintenance is in place, or like even like adjust to what their people preferences are. That would be kind of something that is quite easily achievable, I would say, with the technology we have at the moment. But we slightly need to connect the dots in a different way. So in the ideal world, I'd like to get into a meeting room, and because I've booked it, the room knows that I want the temperature to be set at 23 degrees, for example. I'm just talking very out loud
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But the home, my preference saved in there, so that it makes my life easier, and I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about the temperature, or like the lighting, is the light too much and so on, or adjust the curtains if it has a window and so on, because my preference is that specific preference. So there's so much that we could unlock with AI, and these are just very silly, simple things, because you can argue that, well, you stood up and gone to the controls and changed it yourself, so now you really need AI to do it. Potentially not, but if there is
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
something
you
that
say
makes
that,
it
but it's
easier.
we always, when it comes to AI, we always talk about like the stuff that no human should do, and one of them is to manually check certain things and manually adjust certain things. It's like, well, why you should do that? Like when we could know what the temperature of outside is, when we could know how many people are in the office, when we could have the temperature of inside, why any human needs to get up and go and change the temperature, or whatever the there are things that it shouldn't really happen by human, and we are not good at it anyway because we have our perception of what the
Yes.
temperature should be, and it's quite different from one person to the
And
other.
also, it links back to the sustainability angle of things. It can be that you set it up in a way that you can't really adjust it at that temperature because otherwise you're wasting a lot of carbon. So I guess the very big impact of AI will always be kind of dropping down carbon emission, making sure that buildings are more sustainable. So using that technology and AI and data in a way that impacts the sustainability of our buildings. And that's where I see the biggest role to play for technology and AI. I think we should stop thinking at technology and digital and AI as a silent thing. It needs to cross all the different aspects of our life, really. But in general, when it comes to work, digital is gonna impact the sustainability angle of thing, is gonna impact the productivity, is gonna impact the organization in general of your tasks and everything. And so that there's a lot to unlock there. And in the ideal world, like the enabler bit is actually something that we need to stress out more and more because we're not there yet.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
might think
absolutely.
you might think we are, but because we are in technology and we see this every day, it's easy
Yeah.
for us to actually detect that no, we're not there yet.
No, I'm quite often reminded when I talk to a client and they're using tracking something on paper or on Excel file, and that reminds me of, like, no, the world hasn't hasn't been fully digital yet, and there's a lot of transition that needs to happen. Something that 2 points actually. One is when we talk about real estate and AI, it's really important when we are talking about huge real estate with thousands of people in it, with hundreds of meetings happening at each point in time. So really big buildings is what AI could hugely impact. So one scenario could be like, we have lots of meeting rooms, lots of meetings going on. How do people decide which meeting room to have a meeting in, and overlay the sustainability and everything else on top of it? If we already had a meeting room that somebody had a meeting in, so it's already warmed up, why we would allow a meeting to happen in another meeting room that needs to be warmed up again, and that the other room was already in a good temperature? And how do we arrange the cleaning to make sure that room is already cleaned and ready for the other one? And how do we how could we use AI as an agent that would decide based on the meeting that you have, the requirement of the meeting, the people you're going to have, which floor they work normally or they are at the moment, and what would be the best place for them to have the meeting they want to have, if they are having any hybrid, or is only everybody is face to face, or there is so many different factors that can happen, and that would be something really hard for humans to keep track of and keep
Yeah.
you know changing when different preferences changes and that kind of stuff. So I think that's one use case that allow AI to decide what meeting to be had in what meeting room and how it needs to be managed and prepared, and everybody who needs to be informed at the right time. The big data, when we have big amount of data, AI would become really important. The other part is, we normally at the moment, and you correct me because you're the expert here, but we normally look at the efficiency in use of buildings by the occupancy rate of it, like how like is it occupied all the time and that kind of stuff. Whereas now, with the way we are talking about our expectations of physical spaces changing, should we be still looking at occupancy rate, or should it be, for example, creativity rate or something? The reason we get together in the office has a different, we expect a different outcome out of that, and we should measure that outcome as opposed to, whatever else outcome, the normal occupancy rate.
Yes, but I guess that is a bit too far, because when we're talking about occupancy, many are not looking into that yet, if I'm honest. They're just looking at energy consumption, that's it. And many are not even armed with the right sensors in the right place to determine the occupancy and overlay that with energy consumption and understand, well, actually, there have been like just 10% of the workforce today. So we should have taken more wise kind of actions, and maybe we should have shut down the floor or whatever. So we're not there yet. But definitely, there will be a trend on looking at productivity or well-being of the employees. I've been asked, for example, from a client, do we have any AI tool that can track the well-being of my employees through the tone that they use in an email? Now, you might think this is potentially going a bit too far. And again, we're going back to the data and so on, and the concerns in there. Like, would you be happy if your boss is tracking how you behave from how you write an email? Potentially not, because what does that mean? But it's going to happen. Something similar is going to happen. If not that, there will be implications and impacts.
Yeah.
But when it comes to purely from a real estate point of view, and so from an office point of view, tracking well-being, definitely, and you could potentially put some KPIs around it quite relatively easily, I would say.
I think it really depends on. I'm very, very focused on whenever we talk about technology implementation, what value we are trying to
Yes.
create, or what problem are we going to solve. Because if that's clear and we have a way of measuring it, then adoption will become so much easier. So the point that you made about, are we happy to allow employer to look at like our communication? Well, if we present it as just that we just want to monitor your communication to see when you go off, then nobody's interested. But if we present it as the way we are monitoring the interaction between the employees and customers, which is a normal practice, all customer calls are recorded for training
Yes.
and whatever
Monitoring
purposes,
purpose.
monitoring and training purposes, like nobody has any problem, because you look at that as, sure, the company needs to be able to first protect itself if the customer make a complaint that is not true, or secondly needs to look at bigger trend. If everybody has a problem in their communication with the client, then the customer, then there needs to be a training in place to sort that out. So if you look at that the same way, that to make sure us as employees of a business, we treat each other with respect and and right, this is to protect that, this is to make sure we spot those kind of stuff, then that becomes a more attractive proposition. Because sure, if somebody is a psychopath, they might not be happy with it, but other people, general public, should be, yeah, I get treated better if we have that technology in place. And sure, I'd be more careful how I talk to people,
Yeah,
because I know it's being monitored.
spot on.
Yeah, and the other one, which I just remembered, we talked about when we were prepping for the call a couple of weeks ago. We talked about what if your coffee could be ready on your desk when
Oh,
you
yeah.
arrive? That would be amazing. Um, or in any meeting room that you go in, it's it knows you, it knows what you want and whatever. And the other part was, the challenge we have now with the hybrid work is that people are not getting those incidental interactions in the office. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we can monitor people's conversations and what they are working on, and based on that, just identify I say we, I meant AI. So it can identify that these two people in different departments or different teams, they're working on these two different things, but it would be really interesting for them two or them four to have a lunch together. So let's message them and say, I've seen you're working on these things. There is an intersection. If you could sit together at lunchtime today and discuss these four questions, it could create something interesting. And that would never ever happen without AI, because people wouldn't know what other people are working on, and they wouldn't necessarily go and ask to have lunch to discuss what they're discussing. So I think it requires us to think differently about
Absolutely.
what could be possible.
Yeah, no, hands down. That is the thing that we all need to understand, is that we need to shift the our mindsets. Things are going to change. Things are going to evolve. The things that are possible now weren't possible 10 years ago, or potentially not even 5 years ago. So the technology is evolving at such a rapid pace that we just need to adapt and embrace it. And in terms of like possible implementation, literally the sky's the limit. So what you just said there, I would be so happy if that would happen. Like, oh wow, I've been trying to solve this problem, and actually someone else in the company is doing the same thing. I can see this being kind of a bit hard potentially to implement at first, especially with larger organization. But even if it's not automated through through the tone of the voice, or like by detecting what they're talking about, even if it's just a preference that you could feel every day, or like just clicking a button and that fills out automatically, it would improve massively the way we work. But yeah, that thing about coffee, having the coffee ready when I get to work, is stuff that is happening already. Some companies have created their own apps where you can log in your preferences, and you can say, potentially, when whilst you are commuting, you're going to get to the office in 20 minutes, you're going to get your coffee ready when you are in the office. And
Yeah.
you might
It's
think this
more,
is a silly thing to do, and it's like, why?
no,
But
I don't think it is. I think that's an example. And yes, you can do it without AI now. You can just, create, like, you can capture preferences and find out when people are coming and going to do that. But when I think about it, I think about what makes senior people really happy when they are looked after by a really good PA who knows them so well, better than themselves. They, by the way they enter the office, they know, do they need a coffee or a tea or whatever, or they know them so well that they can make their life more comfortable, so they can do the work that they have to do. It's almost like, and they are so rare, those good PAs are so rare to find, and they're so like limited to the most senior people in the office. What if we could make every single employee to have a really good PA assistant AI that is looking at them, watching them, and come up with things that they might make their life better by looking at the way they work, to tell them, like, you need to have, like, take a break, take a go get a coffee, because you look like a bit tense as I'm
yeah,
watching you. Your body looks like a bit tense. Why don't you do a stretch? Why, you know what those things that are very rare, because they're so expensive to have, one of those people for every single employee. Whereas you could have that implemented with technology. And that's what I meant by, like, we need to think, when it's a scale, then AI and technology becomes the value, because at a scale you can't implement certain things without technology. So if we look at the role of, so if we want to finish by the role of the human, so in the real estate sector, what is it that's so unique, if you can think of, that is we will need a human for? We want to keep a human for that thing, or if there are more than one, that would be.
well, you real estate exists for people in general, so you always will need the a person behind it to determine what to do, really, or like to voice employees' opinions. So you can't really think about the real estate sector without humans in general, because here we're talking about offices or like shops and housing and so on. There's so many layers to the real estate sector in general, but it's for people, so you can't really think
So
and
I
detach.
understand. Let me push back a little bit. I
Yeah,
understand the customer of it all. You can't have them and not having people in them. That's why I think it's a sector that is going to thrive. It's going to exist. The form of it might change, but it's as long as there are human, that real estate will exist, because it's a space that humans get together for different purposes. But do we need humans, or what do we need humans to run them? So when we want to run a real estate, plan for it, clean it, maintain it, sell it, rent it, whatever else that is involved in the real estate, what part of it cannot be done? Assume, like, I'm not talking about the next like 3 to 5 years, I'm talking about like 20 years, when we have more advanced technology, robots, and all your sensors, everything. What do we need humans in that sector for?
I think is the human touch type of things. That's my personal opinion, which is like taking care of a customer. So you need a face. Potentially, people are more reassured by having a human interaction anyway. So whilst AI can run in the background and do all the good stuff for the customers, which are all the things that we've just discussed, you will always need kind of a face to deal with, or like a person, a real person, to more from a customer care point of view. So that's something that you will never, detach from
I, I
the real estate
agree.
sector.
I agree for the short and medium term. I completely agree with you. And that, I think the reason behind that is, until technology is 100% working, you need a human. So people are reassured that they have talked to a human, and that human is going to look after the problem or make the change happen. So that reassurance that there is a human that understands human and they can look after, it's really important for the short and medium term. I'm not too sure, I'm struggling as we talk, I'm not too sure in the distant future if we could have AI perfectly implementing all the maintenance, all the planning, everything. If they can understand humans better than humans can understand
Yeah,
humans, because we know the miscommunication between humans is always a problem. So if the
yeah.
technology can understand me better, so I struggle. So I'm going to think about the future, and I think we should have a beer in the pub talking about
Whatever
like a
you want.
distant future and the role of human.
Yeah, no,
But
but that
definitely, in the meantime, I see a big for reassurance and insurance of
yes.
we need humans.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But again, like as we were discussing before, like things that were happening, they're happening now, where we wouldn't even think that these things would be possible 10 years ago. So it's really hard for me to answer that question. And like in the long term, what's going to be the impact? I can think about more of the short, medium term, which is, as we said, reassuring. People need the reassurance, and they need it from a person. And there's some stuff that you can't really you need kind of a personal touch on. In terms of the long term, I don't really know. That's the answer I could give you. But my hope is that there will always be a role for human. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of more of a too futuristic to even think about it. Like, that is just going to be controlled by machine learning and machines, or AI and so on. And also, to be perfectly honest, like we're talking about AI now, it can be that in 5 years time AI is business as usual, and there's something new coming up. You never know.
Yeah.
So things are going so fast that I don't really know what the future could look like, if I'm
That,
honest.
that's why we are having that's why we are
Yes,
having this series, Our Future with AI, because it's very fascinating to think about what our world is going to look like. And the very important thing is, when we go far in the future and think about this, is this sector going to exist? Say, for example, from the stuff from the past. So I bring example of horse breeding. It changed when the horses are no longer a transport means and we have vehicles. It exists still, but it's for entertainment and a sport. It doesn't exist for transport. So it changes, the whole concept changes. So I find it fascinating to think about what happens to an industry. Would it exist like in 20 years' time, or would it have changed to something else? And I think, but the most important thing is not even that. It's about whatever we can think of, what's the path from here to there, and what do we do today, what do we do in a year time, what are the things we should do if we are going through so much change and so much potential and so much possibilities in front of us. Wonderful. To finish off, is that what is your last piece of advice for people, businesses, business leaders in the real estate when it comes to technology and AI?
First piece of advice is to think of what the challenges that they are facing are and what the drivers that their company have, and look at technology as an enabler, as I was mentioning before. So looking at it as a weapon to basically take off and take out risks, or like efficiency, or anything that they could think of that it's hard for them to manage, to think about AI and technology in general to be implemented in their companies, so that it makes their life easier to run business, really, and to make their employees more happy, and make the company more productive, more greener, and so on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emilia, and it was wonderful to have you in the Innovation Room.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us in the Innovation Room.
We hope it sparks some ideas.
Want to learn more about what we do?
Maybe you could even be our next guest.
And spark some ideas yourself.
Find us at Geeks Limited.
And join us again soon.
Because real change never stops.